Hello, my name is Ricky Wascher and I own and operate Cimamusic Mix Mastering. I hope this video finds you well. As you may know, I've been developing a series of videos that focus primarily on how I mix specific instruments. Now you may have seen the video on how I mix vocals. I did another one on mixing drums. Now this video I want to do something a little different. Instead of focusing primarily on one instrument, I want to focus on all the instruments. So I want to play a song for you and then come back and show you how I mix each instrument so that everything works together within the context of the song. So what I'm going to do is play a song and then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion on how I approached the mix in general. So the song I'm going to be playing for you is a song from an artist I've featured in the past. His name is Luis Loucks-Tavares. And this song is called Junior's Adverb. And the reason why I chose this song in particular is because it is it's a very dense song. There's a lot going on, a lot of drums, percussion, electric guitars, acoustic guitars. There's a Fender Rhodes in there. There's a sitar, percussion. So I want to show you how I approached each instrument in this song to make everything flow well and to give everything its space in the song, in the mix. So without further ado, I will roll the song and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. This is Junior's Adverb from Luis Loucks. Okay, that was Luis Loucks-Tavares again with Junior's Adverb. So let's get started. I want to focus first of all on the drum kit because from a mixing standpoint, that's usually where I begin with the drum kit and the bass guitar. So first of all, the kick drum. I'm a very big fan of the Audix D series. I love recording with it. I love how it captures the drum kit. I love what the D6 does to the kick drum. So that's my primary kick mic, and I also have a another channel where I use a sample, and this is a sample I grabbed from a kick drum from Easy Drummer, and basically the purpose that this track serves is more to give it's more of an EQ rather than being my prominent kick track. It just gives the D6 a little more roundness, and I just like what it does to the overall kick drum. And also I developed another sample which is a 303, and this I made from another Easy Drummer drum kit, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I don't have the sub kick mic. And I like what the sub kick mic does to the kick drum, so I made my own sample, and it sounds terrific on the kick drum. It just gives the low end just a lot more heftiness. So what I did in this case is I sent these two kick channels to a kick bus, and the 303 I sent over to the overall drum bus, which I'll get to in a moment. So I'll show you how I treat the overall kit. And the reason why I did that is because there's a lot of processing on the kick bus, and I didn't want the 303 to be affected by it. So first of all, what I do to the kick is EQ wise, there's something about 150 hertz that hurts my head, pun fully intended. I don't like it. I have the tendency to pull that out when I'm mixing down a kick drum, and it just gives the kick a lot more clarity, and it really makes the bottom end sound cleaner. And I pull out a little bit at 500 just to get rid of the boxiness. The CLA2A is always my go-to compressor for kick drums, so that's compressed pretty hard, and I always use a transient designer, especially in instances like this where there's just a lot going on. So I want to make sure that the kick is peeking through such a dense mix. Now the snare drum, I use 3 mics on a snare drum usually. I like the i5 on snare, and I like it more than the 57. It just has a little more, the high end is a little more hyped, and I just really like how it captures the snare. And I always use a small diaphragm condenser on the bottom of the mic to pick up the snares, and small diaphragm condensers pick up the sizzle very nicely. And in this case I use the ADX51, which is also really hyped on the high end, so it picked up the sizzle a lot, just really effectively in this case. And I use a small diaphragm condenser over the top of the snare also, in conjunction with my i5. And this particular mic is a nice little microphone that a friend of mine, actually the drummer of the guy that's playing drums in this song, Mark Enciso, he brought this mic to my attention. I used it. I fell in love with it. I bought 2 of them. So this is a AKG C430, a very tiny mic, maybe about the size of my pinky. Just picks up the snare very nicely. So now the snare top and bottom I treat with the Shep 73, which is a Neve 1073 clone, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I drive the preamp just a bit. I do a very minor EQing on the mids, on the lows, a little bit on 12K. The bottom mic, I also do a little bit of EQing on the mids at about 7K. And I also drive the preamp, so it's not a very noticeable distortion, but it's just enough saturation to really make the snare drum just pop, and it sounds great. Now the AKG, the small diaphragm condenser I use on the top of the mic, I pull out some of I use the high pass filter to filter out some of the lows, and I also use a low pass filter to filter out the highs, because I don't gate it. I leave it completely open, but obviously it picks up a lot of cymbal. So I use the low pass filter to filter out a lot of that high end. So once everything is mixed in together, I'm not hearing the hi-hats, and I'm not hearing a lot of the rides and the cymbals. So it's mostly just focusing on the wood of the snare. And I had to use the phase switch because it was out of phase with the i5. And on this mic, I use this guy from Softtube, actually from Native Instruments, designed by Softtube. It's the VC160, which is an emulation of the DBX 160 compressor, which sounds phenomenal on snare drums, vocals, bass guitar. But in this instance, I thought it was the most appropriate one for my snare. So now the snare top and bottom go into a snare bus, and I also treat that very lightly, kind of glue them together with the VC160 also. So there really isn't a lot going on. The drums really, for the most part, aren't very heavily compressed. We tried to really maintain a very natural, organic feel to the drum kit. The hi-hat I treat with also with the Q2, which is one of my favorite EQs, by the way. So I roll the high pass up to about 650 hertz to get rid of all the low end and make it more sizzly. And I use a CLA2 compressor. Now, it's not heavily compressed. It just picks up like the really heavy hits just to kind of iron it out. And it's mixed in also with the overhead mics. So there's a lot of balance between the hi-hat channel and the overhead mics. So you can't really tell that the compressor is working. It's just more for some dynamic control. Now my toms, by the way, I do use another, the Audix ADX51 over the hats. Now the toms, tom 1 is a rack tom, tom 2 is a floor tom. So I use the D2 on the tom, on the rack tom, and the D4 on the floor tom. So the rack tom, I just pull out a little 400 just to get rid of the boxiness. I give it a little bit of EQ on the high end at about 7K, and I treat it very lightly with the compressor. Again, just a little bit of dynamic control, and same thing with the floor tom. But in this instance, I pull up the high pass filter to about 45 hertz. There was just kind of a lot going on down there that I didn't want. And I treat that pretty much the same way as the rack tom. Now the overheads, I always use AKG C414s on overheads. I love the way these mics pick up a drum kit. There's just to me no better mic. So the only thing I do to treat the overheads is just roll up the high pass a little bit just to get rid of a lot of the bottom end information. I like my overheads to sound like overheads. I like the cymbals to be prominent, but I keep it back just enough to give me a little bit of tone of the kick drum and the snare and the toms. And I also treat the overhead mic with compression. And the way I have this working is it's compressing very fast, just the peaks. Basically what this does is it's really controlling my snare drum. So my focus isn't on controlling the overheads. I just want to control everything else that's going on in the overhead mic, so it doesn't sound overly compressed. When I track the drums, I set up two room mics. One is a Mojave MA201 FET mic, and the other one is a Rhodes NT2000. And I treat them pretty much the same. I roll up the high pass filter. I don't want a lot of the low end information. And I pull down at the VQ at about 450 hertz. I roll up the top end also. I don't want a lot of the high end information, and I treat them pretty much the same. So one is about 6 feet in front of the drum kit. The other one is about maybe 15 feet away. So I capture different angles and echoes, if you will, of the room. And these I treat pretty heavily with the CLA 76. I'm sorry. I have all buttons in, and anybody that knows these compressors, that setting is just a whole different monster. So the room mics are treated very, very harshly. I roll them in just a little bit in the mix, and it just gives the drum kit just a lot of impact and room and tone. It just sounds great. Now all of this I have coming into the drum bus. And on the drum bus, I like to use the API 2500. For a rock song, there's no better compressor for gluing the drum kit together. So the AP 2500 is usually my go-to. So all of this goes into a drum master. So I did mention earlier that my 303 goes straight to the drum bus, and everything else kind of has their own bus, the kick bus, the snare bus. So I use this just for overall volume. So if I need to come back and turn the drum kit up or turn it down, I can do it with just one fader. Now the reverbs or the effects I use a reverb, and this is I believe a plate. Yeah, it's a plate. And I have a short plate and a long plate. I use a short plate for the drum kits, and the long plate I use for other instruments. I'm a big fan of plate reverbs. And I have a reverb set up for vocals, which I'll go through when I get to the vocals. And I have a distortion set up for bass guitar, and I have an echo set up, and that usually goes to, well, in this instance, it goes to electric guitars. So now the bass guitar. I took two signals from the bass guitar. There was a DI, and also I used the Audix D6 on the speaker. So I treated these two differently. Basically what I did, the DI went through a Focusrite ISA2 mic preamp. And this I just EQ'd it pretty heavily, as you can see. Mostly the top end. And I dropped the low pass filter I have set to the low pass filter I have set to 3K. So basically I have it filtered so that from about 20 hertz to 3K, that's all I'm letting in here. And the reason why I did that is because I use the D6 to give me all the high frequencies. So in this case, the filter is dialed up to 350, the high pass, I'm sorry. And the low pass is off, so it's letting in all the high end. So basically, really, for all intents and purposes, the DI is my low end, the D6 is my high end, and it just splits the signals and lets me control the low end and the high end separately, and gives me more control of the bass overall. So these two go into the bass bus, where I pull up the high pass filter to about 50 hertz. There's a lot of information. The bass had just a lot of low end, so I needed to roll this up a bit. And I pulled down 200 substantially also, just to clean up the bottom end of the bass. Now, the compressor that I use for the bass guitar is one of the best compressors that I have in my collection. I mean, I have some of the wave stuff and so the Fab Filter stuff and the soft tube stuff, but this by far is one of my favorites. This is from a company called SK Note Audio, and this is an emulation of the Distressor, and also it has an emulation of their distortion, the fatso, I believe it's called. So everything kind of rolled up into one. And I have this set on the LA2A setting, and it just really tightens up my bass guitar. If this compressor is great, it cost me like $30. sknoteaudio.com, I believe, is the website. You have to check it out. I use this also on vocals. Later on, I'll show you. And I use this little guy here. I always, more than usual, I'll use a saturation on my bass guitar. And this particular one, I'm a huge fan of. This is URS, and they make a great saturation plugin. I use the tube preamp, and it gives a lot of sizzle to the top end of the bass, and just makes it sound incredibly good. So now the electric guitars. Okay, let me see. I've got to come back and remember what I did. Now, because the electric guitars are so percussive in this song, I wanted to kind of bring that out a little bit more. So I first started off by treating the rhythm guitar with a transient designer, and in this case, the Stillwell, the transient monster. So I did that on both guitars. Now the microphones I used on the electric guitars is the C414. I just love the way it captures electric guitars. The guitar player used a Vox. I can't remember what model it was, but it was also, I mean, a very good amplifier. So I used the C414 to capture all the electric guitars, and all of the guitars I sent to a guitar bus. Now these are more rhythmic, you know, strums and things like that, so I didn't treat them with the transient designer. So everything goes into the guitar bus. So I treat everything the same. Roll up the high pass filter to about 75. I always roll back the low pass filter. I don't like a lot of sizzle on the top of the electric guitars, so I like to carve it so that it fits in this nice little pocket in the mix where it's not taking up a lot of low end and a lot of high end. So I pull up the high end just a bit at about 8K, and that's really it. There really isn't much more going on. And I compress this with the CLA 3A, which this is usually my go-to compressor on a rock distorted guitar. So I have a little bit of echo going on also, just to make the guitar sound spacey and to make it sound a little bigger in the mix. Now, if you remember the guitar solo, and I want to go back to this, the guitar player, Luis, well, the songwriter / guitar player, asked me, he said, I want something to kind of lead the guitar solo in, so I made this. So that starts the guitar solo. Let me play it in its entirety. So it's like a build up. So I took a guitar, I strummed it, and I put in some fades, put in a tremolo, and that's basically the effect for bringing in the guitar solo. And then I have the electric guitar, the guitar solo, which I also use the same SSL G channel EQ, also LA3A compressor. I use some phaser and a little bit of EQ just to pull down again the top end. And this one I also treat with my long plate reverb, again to give it more space. So my acoustic guitars, there's a lot of acoustic guitar rhythm in the choruses. There's some backward strums with a 12-string. So my acoustic guitars go into, at least these two go into my my guitar bus. And the way I treated these, I used the Pro Q2 again from FabFilter, and I roll off a lot of the top end again to keep my guitar in check. And I use this little guy here. This is a compressor from Klang. I want to say Klanghelm. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is a phenomenal compressor. It cost me about 25 to 30 bucks. I can't really remember how much I paid for it, but it has a lot of different emulations. This is, I believe, sounds more like a Fairchild, I want to say. So I use that on the acoustic guitars. It just warms it up very nicely. It's got a little saturation button here. You can change kind of the overall like EQ effect. So I have that on neutral, but just really, really nice on acoustic guitars. And on my acoustic guitar bus, I use this saturation plugin pretty heavily, again, to give it a little more saturation, to warm it up a bit. And I use a transient designer, this time from Waves. And this is actually a setting I got from Jack Joseph Puig, who and he used a very similar setting on a song from Fergie, Boys Don't Cry, I think it's called. So I came back, of course, and I experimented and said, I like this and I'm going to use it. And I found the opportunity to use it. So I get a lot of these ideas from my favorite mixers. There's a couple of more influences coming along down the line. The sitar I grabbed from I believe it's Sample Tank 3. And the way I treated that is just bring down the top again with a low pass filter. Cranked it up at 8K. Pulled back a little bit of my my harsher frequencies that kind of bothered me at around 5.5. So it's treated pretty lightly. I mean, they're not very heavy EQ moves, and I use the CLA 76 for compression. Now the Rhodes, this is really kind of what keeps things busy. You can hear the Rhodes throughout the song. So I treated that with just the SSL EQ. I also am compressing it fairly hard because it's a very, very dynamic instrument. So I wanted to make sure that you could hear everything throughout the song. So I used the CLA 2A compressor on that. I threw on the chorus. And I also used this little guy here, which is the Brainworks BX Solo. And basically what that does is it widens the stereo field. So in this case, the Rhodes, it went from like 100% to 150%. So it sounds like my Rhodes is outside of my speakers. And this is a really, really cool effect. So I wanted to kind of accentuate the Rhodes, kind of bring it, make it pop out of the speakers. So I used that little guy there. Now the percussion, I used the cabasa pretty extensively throughout the song, and I want to give you an example here. So it's just to give it a little bit of this. I felt like throwing something. I said earlier that there's a lot going on, but I wanted to throw something else in, just something different, something unpredictable. So we have that cabasa going on kind of on the side. And also I have this percussion part here. There you go. Now this percussion part was very deliberate, and this is actually something I got from a mixer by the name of Andrew Scheps, and he's actually the guy responsible for mixing the new Green Day record. He's done Metallica, Adele. I mean, I'd have to say that he's probably one of my favorite mixers. He has a webinar, and he was talking about how he threw in some percussion to kind of excite a certain part in a song that he was presenting via this webinar. And I thought, that would be a pretty nice thing to use during this part. So this is what it sounds like. Now it's panned hard left and right. And basically what happened was the drummer was here laying down other percussion tracks, and we grabbed everything that fit in our hands and just shook in front of a mic. And from a mix standpoint, I bring it up very subtly so it can add a little excitement and drive to the chorus. Just so things aren't sounding samey, so the chorus has a little bit of a different feel. So just to show you real fast how this works, I'm going to play you the song with the percussion, or without the percussion part first, and then with. There you go. Okay, and this is with. There you go, telling lies, it's your disguise, who you trying to. So the intent is not for the percussion to be in your face. It's not the prominent instrument. It's just something in the background to move that part, to give a little more excitement to the part, because it's very bombastic. You have the backwards sitar and the 12 string and the vocals, and it becomes really big and huge. So I wanted to add a different, another element, another layer to that bombastic part of the song. So that's an Andrew Shep's idea I borrowed, and I love it. I think it brought a lot to the song. And the way I treated this is just a little bit of EQ, just roll off some of the top end, and used the LA 76, and I distorted it a bit. Now this is a free distortion plugin that you can still find in different corners of the internet universe, and it's fantastic. I love this for really heavily distorting things, and this was just perfect on this percussion track, because I wanted it to sound even more percussive than we could get it to sound by merely just shaking the percussion in front of the mic. So it really brought a lot of that to the percussion tracks. Now the vocal track, this I did my own double. So what I mean by that is I cloned I copied the lead vocal track, and I brought it over here, moved it up about 0.25 milliseconds just to delay it a little bit, so it can give me that vocal double feel. So the main vocal part, let me just go through this one by one, is EQ'd pretty heavily. I'm using an SM7, and SM7s don't really have a lot on the top end. They're fantastic microphones, and it was the perfect mic for this instance. And I believe it's going through my Focusrite ISA too. So I pulled up the top end pretty substantially. Pulled out a little bit at 500 hertz, again, to get rid of the boxiness on the vocal. And right here, as I indicated earlier, I use this plugin, the Disto from SK Note. Phenomenal compressor. Now, what I do on the lead vocal on this one is I use a little bit of parallel compression too. So this compressor isn't working too hard. It's catching the peaks. It's keeping the peaks at bay while I use my parallel channel to bring up the noise floor, the bottom, so all those quieter parts can be more prominent in the mix. And I'll go through my parallel channel in just a moment. So my vocal double, I narrowed the EQ substantially. I don't want a lot of the low end information. I don't want a lot of the high end information. I want the double to be noticeable, but not prominent. Is the word I keep on using, the word of the day. And I also use a little bit of this guy on there. Now and I'll get to the bridge in a moment. My parallel channel is just the Puig Child, which is a Fairchild emulation, cranked to the absolute hilt. So this brings up the noise floor while the this guy here controls the peaks, and it flattens the voice very nicely, keeps everything present. Everything that he's singing is audible, and it's forward, and it really cuts through the mix quite nicely. And I have the parallel channel, I have a little bit of reverb, and I have a little bit of delay. Now, Luis, at first when I mixed it, I didn't have anything but a slight reverb, and he wanted something a little more echo delay on it, so we went ahead and threw that in afterwards. Now I want to go back to the vocal reverb and show you what I did here. So the name of this strategy is the Abbey Road reverb trick. And basically what it consists of is just an EQ and your favorite reverb. In this case, I use the Pro Q2 again. And you take what you want to do is you want to narrow the frequency range. So you pull the high pass filter up to 600 hertz, the low pass filter, you pull it down to 10K, and you drop the frequency in the middle. It's really simple. And then after that, you throw on your favorite reverb, and in this case, I use the Lexicon Hall, a large Hall. And I kind of went the extra mile and used the BX Solo, and I wanted the reverb to sound, again, bigger and wider, and I threw this on so it could give me that very effect. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and play the vocal track with and without the reverb. Let me mute my delay so you can listen to what it does to the vocal.
Well, I wanted you to hear this naturally, and I wanted you to feel this naturally. There you go, telling lies, it's your disguise.
So now let me play this in the context of the mix.
Well, I wanted you to hear this naturally, and I wanted you to feel this.
So as you can hear, it's a subtle effect. It's not this big, huge, bombastic reverb. It just gives the voice, in the context of a mix, it gives the vocal just space. It's very, you can't really perceive it. It's very subtle, but it gives the voice, it just makes it sound roomier, if that makes any kind of sense. So I used that on pretty much all the vocal tracks, just again to give it space without making it sound too big and washy. I'm not really a big fan of using reverb in mixes. As you can tell, there's really not a lot of reverb anywhere on my drum bus, and where I do use it, I use it sparingly. It's very subtle. So for the last part, I use I take all my background vocals usually especially when I have so much going on, and I like to just collapse it onto one track and treat it that way. And in this case, the background vocals were sung through a Mojave through the MA201 FET mic, the FET mic, and I sang the background vocals actually. So I treated them by pulling up the high pass to 250 hertz, pulling up a 3K, and I do this because I like the vocals to pop and to have kind of their own space in the mix. And I also pulled down the high pass filter, the low pass filter, I'm sorry, a little bit. So as you can see, I use the high pass and low pass filter a lot. And in digital recording, there's this kind of argument between digital and analog recording, and some people say they can hear a difference and some people say they can't. I don't know if it's my imagination or how to justify it, but I can. To me, digital recording is harsher on the high end. So I like to treat instruments and give instruments and vocals and everything their room, because I don't like a lot of buildup right here. So I give everything their space, in the context of the mix and try to keep stuff from building up on the low end and from building up on the high end, and vocals included. So for the background vocals, I use the LA2A, and instead of using an EQ to boost the high end after treating it this way, I use the Aphex Oral Exciter, and it just gives a nice clarity to the top end. You can call it an EQ to treat the high end, but it's more of a filter, and it sounds really nice, especially because the background vocals are, you know, the oohs and ahs and very, you know, this big choir type. It's got this big choir type feel to it, so it just worked well for in this particular setting. And I also ran it through a parallel chain, just to give it more intensity, again for the purpose of bringing it forward, because there's just a lot going on in the mix. And I put some chorus, a stereo chorus on it, and treated it with my Abbey Road reverb. And really, that's it. My master bus has... I usually use this on my master bus most of the time. The NLS channel, or NLS bus, is a great effect. It gives that analog warmth. And I love the Nevo setting. And then I run it through my SSL comp for just a little bit of glue, and we are good to go. And usually after this, I run it into a print volume. So this is actually an AUX. So everything is running through here, and I use the AUX as my master bus, so that I can run this into a print channel, and then I print my mix here. And it's really cool to do that way, because I can listen to it while I'm printing, and I can do fader rides if I want. I can listen for mistakes or other dynamics I want to go back and change. So before it goes to my print channel and I actually print it out, I have this print volume, so that if things are running too hot into my print channel, I use this to just bring the volume down and give my final print a little more headroom. So really, in a nutshell, that's how I go about, in this case, how I went about treating a mix. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. My email is cimamusic@hotmail.com. My phone number is 520-313-4852, and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/cimamusicstudio, or visit my website at cimamusicstudio.com. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to make another one very soon. Thank you very much, and peace.